Wednesday afternoon to you. I hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. A little later in the show, we will be joined by Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter, to talk what the Cavs might do with that third pick, who they're looking at, and potentially who they could trade to upgrade that roster. But we begin by talking Browns football. We'll be joined by Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. But let's take a look. Odell Beckham Jr. rehabbing, posting it on social media. Odell flying on one of those curved treadmills. That means it's all leg-powered. And Scott, when you look at that, Odell continues to get after it and rehab so he can get back to full strength with the beginning of training camp.
Hey, Dave. It's something else. You know, you see Odell, and we know all these athletes are special, right? All these professional athletes, but he's just a special. And we saw that in the kind of treadmill video. We've seen it throughout the offseason with his social media. And then we saw it again in person for those of us that were at minicamp last week. And I think it was reassuring, and I think it gives hope for how Odell can change this offense and turn it into something even more dynamic if he stays healthy.
And that kind of leads us into the next part. You had 5 takeaways from minicamp. One of them is he's back, is in Odell, and he certainly looks like he is fast and able to cut and do all the things that he could before.
Yeah, it really does. And, you know, again, it's amazing. It's only 7 months removed from that ACL surgery, and that's a really quick recovery. And to see him run routes and cut and look like he's going full speed, we did not get to talk to Odell. So maybe he could say he's only at 95% or whatever that number is. But to my eye, he looked really, really good. And the same, Baker said the same thing, and Jarvis Landry and Kevin Stefanski. So it was pretty unanimous just how good he looked. And yeah, you saw him run close to full speed, if not full speed, cut, jump, catch, all the things a receiver needs to do.
And that, again, I'm with you. I think that could mean really big things for this offense. Second on your takeaways of 5, fitting in, and that refers to Jadeveon Clowney. Again, if he finds a way to be a part of this defensive line, that could be huge for this defense.
Yeah, and this was the first time we got to see him, right? We talked to him once when he signed, but this was the first time on the field, and really it was the first time the coaches got to see him on the field in a Browns uniform because he wasn't at the OTAs. So, number one, it's just good to see him in person, and you get, it's different watching a guy on TV or on film or even from a press box, and then you're up close watching him go through the drills. And he looked explosive. He looked quick. And then there was the injury component with him. And he had surgery in December to repair a torn meniscus. Obviously not as serious a surgery as Odell's torn ACL, but still significant. And the fact that he looked good and he declared himself fully healthy, said he wouldn't have been at minicamp if he weren't fully healthy, is a really good sign. And when you think about what this defensive line can look like, and you have Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney on the other end, and Takk McKinley, which if you go to passing downs and McKinley's at one end, and then Garrett and Clowney is at the other end, one of those guys slides inside, probably with Malik Jackson. All of a sudden, it looks like a really big-time defensive line, and that's what Clowney said. And I'm working on a story about that, is he compared them to the 2019 49ers. Said the D-line reminded him of that, and that was the D-line carried that Niners team to the Super Bowl, and they had a chance to beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. So, I think this line has a way to go to prove it's that good and that deep, because that Niners D-line was really deep. But you see the pieces, and the number 2 most important piece, I would argue, is Clowney. Maybe he doesn't have to play like the number 1 overall pick, but he's got to play like a legitimate big-time end opposite Myles, so that one of those guys has one-on-one blocking and can defeat that and get to the quarterback.
Yeah, and don't minimize a meniscus tear. Think about playing defensive line or offensive line basically with one leg being at full strength, and that's kind of what Jadeveon Clowney was trying to do a season ago. Your third takeaway, and this one equally as important, ready to go, and that's referring to the quarterback, Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of discussion in the last month because they're kind of in a vacuum. There's not a whole lot to talk about. And it was Baker and Mayfield not being at OTAs, and pretty much the whole starting offense not being at OTAs. Well, everybody was at minicamp, and starting with Baker, got rave reviews. Kevin Stefanski, coordinator Alex Van Pelt, both said he looked really comfortable in year 2 of the system, in being in year 2 of the Kevin Stefanski offense. And not that it was in any doubt, but he hadn't practiced in front of the coaches, right? He had a couple of those training sessions in Florida and Texas with some of the skill position guys, but he'd been in all, or at least most of, the offseason meetings, the virtual team meetings and offensive meetings. You go through the playbook, you install the offense. And I think that was really important. And when we talked about guys not being at practice or being at practice, I think we maybe overlooked the fact that those meetings are really important at this time of the year. And it seems like Baker didn't miss a beat, that he's ready to build on what he did over that second half of last season. And it starts with comfort in the offense, and it sure looks like he has it.
So your 4th of 5 takeaways, secondary sights, and referring to Grant Delpit and Greedy Williams.
Yeah, we'd seen a little bit of those guys in OTAs. We saw a lot more of them in minicamp. And the fact that Greedy Williams was the consistent starter in minicamp, opposite Denzel Ward, I don't know how significant it is because, you have training camp and a lot of times coaches don't let the rookies go with the starters right away, feel like they have to earn it. But I think the fact that he got that many reps with the first team signifies that the Browns are confident he's going to be healthy. And he still needs to pass some of those final hurdles with the shoulder and contact and tackling. But if Greedy Williams is healthy, then that gives you, whether or not it's a training camp battle, but it gives you options at corner. You can go Ward and Williams outside with Troy Hill or Greg Newsome II, maybe playing in the slot. And that was something I'm not sure we expected to see, but we saw in minicamp is Newsome taking reps at nickelback, which gives Joe Woods more versatility back there. And then Grant Delpit, we haven't really seen him. We saw him for maybe a week and a half of training camp last year, but for him to be out there taking a lot of reps, I think it's a good sign. And, we know Joe Woods wants to use a bunch of safeties, and Grant Delpit's one of those guys he's counting on.
So the 5th of the 5 up for grabs, and that's in reference to the wide receiver position.
Yeah, I don't know if there'll be any huge training camp battles this year just because it feels like a lot of these spots are accounted for. But if you look a little deeper, that third receiver spot, I know the fans love Rashard Higgins. And the Browns brought him back on a pretty cheap contract. But it's not guaranteed that he's going to get the most reps at that third spot. You have Kadarius Hodge, who was the number 3 receiver when the season started last year, and Donovan Peoples-Jones, who Baker said looks really good. And he showed glimpses last year in limited time. He made an impact, including that game winner against the Bengals. So you have those 2 guys, and you have the rookie Anthony Schwartz, who didn't even participate in minicamp because he's dealing with the hamstring. So you get those 4 guys battling for the reps behind Odell and Jarvis Landry. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see who gets the lion's share, if anybody. I don't know if they split them equally or one guy kind of emerges as the true number 3.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. You can find his content as well. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we're going to talk contract extensions. How much money do you think Baker Mayfield is going to get from the Browns? We'll hear a couple of national guys take on that. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to Sports for CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns football with Scott Petrak. So a lot has been made as a lot of these young quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, of course, Baker Mayfield, all due for their second contracts. The perspective of who gets the first contract, how much is it, it's up for debate. Jeremy Fowler from ESPN had this to say on how those three quarterbacks shake out.
So I'm told that Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens have had early discussions on a contract extension. It hasn't graduated much beyond that yet. I'm told Jackson is in no rush. He's representing himself. He's his own agent. So he is in control now. And I'm told Baltimore, because they know this is going to be in a very high tax bracket, we could be talking maybe that $40 million a year threshold, that they want to get this done sooner than later so they can stretch out the cap hit, because he's got 2 years left on his rookie deal. So they've done that with Marlon Humphrey and Ronnie Stanley, and past first-round picks would like to do the same. Let's go to Baker Mayfield in Cleveland. I'm told from people around the league, they believe this could get done maybe the soonest out of the three, because Jackson and Josh Allen are maybe considered top 5 to 7 quarterbacks. Baker's a very good player, but not quite there yet, so could have a different market. And, you know, I'm told Cleveland wants to keep their core together. Wyatt Teller, Denzel Ward, Mayfield, all those guys.
Scott Petrak, what do you make of that whole rationale there?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, you kind of have to view all through those three guys together, Lamar, Jackson, Baker Mayfield, and Josh Allen. And part of me thinks that Baker will wait to see what the other guys do, just because I think it's easier for an agent and even for the team once the market is set. I do believe that the Browns are committed to Baker as their long-term franchise quarterback, and that they are more than willing to get a deal done whenever the timing is right, which could be, you know, in training camp sometime. They could wait until next year, but it feels like it's just a matter of where the two sides can agree that Baker fits in the QB landscape. You know, and I think it's probably less than Patrick Mahomes, who is, you know, a 45 to 50 million a year guy. Dak Prescott's at 40. And, you know, you would say Dak Prescott's had a better start to his career than Baker, and I agree with that. But the next quarterback always seems to make more. So, you know, I think it probably winds up somewhere around $40 million for Baker. And then I guess he could say, hey, let's wait one more year. If I take the team to the Super Bowl and I become an all-pro, maybe I can get $45 million a year.
You know, that's very interesting. Here's another national take, and this is by Emmanuel Acho, guy that used to be an NFL player, did play for the Browns, and he said it's not always the best at a position that gets paid the most.
Is Baker Mayfield as good as Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson? Absolutely not. Okay. No, Baker Mayfield is not as good as Josh Allen nor Lamar Jackson.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on the same page there.
Well, let's go.
That wasn't the question.
Next topic.
Is Dak Prescott as good as Patrick Mahomes? No. Is he as good as Aaron Rodgers? No. Is he as good as Russell Wilson? No. But is he making more money over the course of the next 4 years? Yes. So you can make more money or just as much money if you are not as good. Why? Because how much value do you bring to the organization that you are at?
What are you, a CPA? What the hell? How much value do you bring? How many wins you got?
How much value do you bring to the organization you're at? CEOs are paid on a sliding scale. And that sliding scale is based upon how the company that they run is doing. Yeah. They don't care about how the company that somebody else runs is doing. How is the company doing that you run? And the company that Baker Mayfield runs, the Cleveland Browns, is doing better than they've ever done.
Scott Petrak, he is incredibly insightful and makes a really, really good point, being Emmanuel Acho.
Yeah, he does. And I think we do overlook that. I don't know if it's even an intangible, but we overlook that factor when we talk about where Baker ranks among these quarterbacks, because it's significant. And I know that his side will argue this or discuss this when they negotiate with the Browns, is the impact that he's had on this franchise. They were 0-16 when they drafted him, right? The Browns were. So he's been a huge part of the culture change and the turnaround. And that brings real value, to use Emmanuel's, phrasing. That does bring real value. And there's also the hidden part of the discussion is, what do you do if you don't have Baker Mayfield, right? The Browns search forever. Every fan knows, we all know, that the jersey list, and they went through 30 guys before Baker. So if the Browns decide, hey, we're not going to pay Baker X number of dollars because he's not worth it, they might be right. Maybe he's not worth it, in the grand scheme of things, and he's not as good as Prescott or Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson. But then what do you do at quarterback? And I don't think there's an easy answer for that, or I don't think there's really any good answer for that, which means you're going to have to pay Baker Mayfield a ton of money and hope he continues to improve and hope he lives up to the contract. And I really think the Browns are comfortable in the belief that he will.
Yeah, and you've got to support him and give him the tools that he needs to do that. All right, let's go Browns contract extensions and kind of shift the focus just a little bit. So you've got Nick Chubb, you've got Wyatt Teller, you've got Baker Mayfield, you've got Denzel Ward. Do you think any of those get done before training camp end of July?
I think Nick Chubb could. For a long time, I thought Baker would be number one because it's the highest contract, right? The Browns are going to pay him the most. I think it gives you some salary cap certainty if you have the guy that's making $40 million a year on the books, and you can figure out how you want to structure that and then deal with the other guys. But maybe that takes a little longer. Maybe it takes into August. So I could see Nick Chubb being the first one. I really think after talking to Nick last week, it reaffirmed that he wants to stay. He talked about not liking uncertainty, and he knows what he has in Cleveland. And I just really got the vibe that he wants to come back. And I don't think the Browns would try to lowball him. I think they'll pay him whatever, $12, $14 million a year. And that's market value, and that's going to be good enough. So I could see the Nick Chubb deal getting done. I think the Browns will probably wait on Denzel Ward just because they have all this money for Chubb and Mayfield. He's got that fifth-year option, so he's already signed through 2022. And then I think Wyatt Teller's interesting. Like, I think that might be a position where the Browns said, we can't pay 5 offensive linemen big money, and Teller might be the guy that falls through the cracks.
Scott Petrak and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we continue talking about Browns football. A national pundit has Nick Chubb ranked as the best running back. We'll hear who that is. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
COVID-19 has changed how we show up and show out with our family. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to talking smack with a side of mac and cheese.
Before we can safely come together, we need the facts.
As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions.
Should I get it?
Is it safe?
Should I wait?
It's smart to question. Now, get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns football with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. So ESPN's Mima Kimes ranked the best running backs in the NFL from the top on down. Take a listen to who she had as number one.
I think Nick Chubb is the best running back in the NFL, and I don't care who knows it. Here are my rankings. I think I have my rankings.
You do.
Yes,
You're good.
they are.
Yes.
Look, I'm going to explain myself. Oh man, the Panthers fans are gonna be so mad. Okay, here's the thing. Nick Chubb, he is just the best pure rusher in the group. His power, his top end speed, his contact balance, his vision, all elite. He only ranks behind Derrick Henry in big play runs, which ESPN defines as 20 yards or more. That said, he ranks above Derrick Henry in yards after contact per carry and first downs per run. He is incredibly efficient, and he does benefit from playing behind a very good Browns offensive line. I think a lot of these backs you'll see play behind pretty good offensive lines. But if I was starting a football team from scratch and picking a back out of this group, I would go with Nick Chubb.
Scott, what do you make of that argument for Nick Chubb?
Yeah, I think it's a strong one. I really do. If I were saying, and kind of like Mina said, I think Nick Chubb is the best pure runner in the league. And I know people would argue Derrick Henry. I know what he's done the last couple of years. I feel like Chubb is more well-rounded. I think like we saw when the Browns beat the Titans last year. If you can get penetration and get to Henry before he gets going, I think it takes him a while to kind of build up that head of steam. And with Chubb, I just feel like he breaks so many tackles. He's quicker. I feel like he's quicker. He's got that breakaway speed. Not that Henry doesn't. I just really like Chubb's game as a runner. The only issue for me is if you take in the receiving part of it with Kamara and McCaffrey, Chubb still has a way to go there. And the Browns really don't ask him to do that much because they have Kareem Hunt. But I'm fine with Minas making that case. And if you took the receiving part out of it, Chubb would be my number one guy too.
Yeah, and I think the point is after contact. That is what you're looking for with a running back. I think sometimes he gets penalized because the Browns' offensive line is viewed as being so good.
Yeah, I agree with you. And in this discussion, we're not even mentioning the intangibles that Chubb brings, where when his coaches and teammates and GMs talk about, like, hey, practice like this guy and work out like this guy, they talk about Nick Chubb. And to me, that carries great value as well. And that's one of the reasons, like, I don't think the Browns philosophically love paying running backs a bunch of money. But I think the exception is Nick Chubb. And I think we're going to see that with that contract that we talked about. So there's so much to like about him. The home run threat, the tough yardage, the breaking tackles, like you mentioned, like he just does so much of it. And then you flash back to that Pittsburgh game, and he did catch that screen pass, which might have been the biggest play in the game after Pittsburgh had rallied to cut into the deficit or cut into the Browns' lead. So he has that versatility, and I think, especially after he dropped a couple passes in that playoff loss to the Chiefs, I think Nick's going to come back more motivated than ever to prove he is a little bit of a dual threat and can catch the ball.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. So Pro Football Focus is listing the top 50 players in the NFL for the upcoming season. They're doing it 10 at a time. They revealed 21 to 30 today. So number 21 on the list, Joey Bosa. 22 is Russell Wilson. 25 is Myles Garrett. Nick Bosa at 27. So Myles Garrett at 25. He joins Nick Chubb, who is at 37, and John Johnson, who is at 41. But what do you make of Myles Garrett, ranked number 25 by Pro Football Focus?
Yeah, on first glance, I might think, yeah, that sounds a little low because, Myles is in the discussion for Defensive Player of the Year. He was last year before the bout with COVID. He will be again this year. I saw one of the gambling sites had him as a favorite to be Defensive Player of the Year. But when you include him in the same five-some as both Bosa brothers, then it kind of fits, right? He's not Aaron Donald yet. He didn't have the same season as TJ Watt did, so those guys are probably a little bit higher. Or Donald's probably a lot higher. He's probably top. He might be the top guy on the list. But so it seems like that fits for Myles, and it also feels like he's only going to get better. The next couple of years, I think he'll be really hitting his peak and could be considered a top 10 player. Which is something for a defensive guy when it's so slanted toward quarterbacks and, playmakers. So it seems about right, but I think that is also something that Myles will use as motivation to say, hey, I'm better than these guys. I'm better than both Bosas. I should be a top 10 guy. Yeah,
and if he stays healthy, we know what COVID did to him last year. He was on track to do something pretty special. Let me ask you this. So the top 20 will be revealed over the next couple of days. Do you think any of the Browns get into that? And keep in mind, offensive line is one of the top-ranked, it is the top-ranked offensive lines as far as Pro Football Focus goes.
Yeah, I would doubt it for two reasons. One, you'd look at the Browns, and I kind of think Miles is their best player. You can make an argument for Nick Chubb. I think when he's healthy, you could make an argument for Odell Beckham Jr. But I kind of feel like the consensus is Miles is the best player. The only other guy I could see is, I know Pro Football Focus loves Wyatt Teller, right? I mean, he was a number 1 ranked guard last year. The problem with Teller is, number one, it's a small sample size. It was really only last year. That was his first year as a full-time starter. That was his breakthrough. I think if you're ranking the top guys in the league, you need more of a track record than that. And I kind of didn't agree with PFF's ranking of Teller that high, just because I thought he struggled in pass protection, especially the second half of the year. And he attributed that to the ankle injury that kind of lingered, and he fought through to play. But that's such a big part of the game, period, in the NFL, that just because you're a dominant run blocker, if you're average or below average as a pass protector, I don't think that equates to best guard in the league. So I kind of disagree with them on that, and I would have a hard time putting him in the top 20 overall, just given all that.
Fair enough. Let's take a look at this. This was tweeted out by NFL Stats on Twitter. It goes red zone percentage of touchdowns from a season ago. And take a look at the Browns. In some elite company with those offenses, Browns 73.3% of the time they got into the red zone, they scored touchdowns. And you see Packers, Titans, Seahawks, and Saints are the company they're keeping. You see those that struggled are the ones that generally struggle to win. How impressive was the Browns' red zone offense?
It's huge. I mean, it really is. That separates wins from losses, right? The 7 points for the touchdown to the 3 points for the field goal is a difference in so many NFL games. Hugely impressive. It kind of flashes me back a little. I don't know the exact numbers, but at the end of 2018, when the Browns were playing well and winning those games, they were good in the red zone. Now, there's some tricks there. Freddie Kitchens kind of had a wide open playbook, and there's some gadget stuff. The Browns a year ago didn't have that. To me, it felt way more legitimate, and it speaks to, number one, the play calling. You have that list of 5 teams, the top 5 teams, all of those with great play callers, maybe with the exception of Seattle. But Sean Payton with the Saints and Arthur Smith when he was with the Titans, really, really good play callers. And I think Kevin Stefanski is starting to gain that reputation, even though he's only been a play caller for a couple of years. And then it's quarterback play. Does your quarterback make good decisions? And I think that Baker, in his short career, has proven that he does when it's tough to do. That red zone, it gets compressed. It's not easy to execute down there, and Baker's shown a knack for doing it.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can also read his stuff on brownzone.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Stay with us. Anthony Schwartz racing a roller coaster. Straight ahead when Sports4CLE continues. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
At Social Security, we are always thinking of ways to save you time and make things easier. That's why we created My Social Security. A My Social Security account allows you to access your earnings history and benefits information, request a replacement Social Security card, get a proof of income letter, estimate and apply for benefits, and more. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security. Securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Welcome back to Sports for CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns football with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. So Browns rookie Anthony Schwartz, world-class speed, also a huge roller coaster enthusiast. You put one and one together and you come up with Anthony Schwartz, rookie for the Browns, wide receiver, racing the roller coaster top thrill dragster from Cedar Point.
Ready, and go! You didn't win!
I mean, like, I'm out here in park clothes, not even warmed up.
So if you had done your morning stretches,
I did my morning stretch, morning jog, you know, it'll be easy. And he had to cheat. He false started, had his hands up and all.
He did have his hands up. Yeah, what was that about?
He's trying to cheat me out.
The false start call. So Scott Petrak, Anthony Schwartz, a guy that's having a lot of fun as far as the roller coasters and what goes, and his speed is pretty real.
It really is. And I talked to Gus Malzahn, who was his coach at Auburn, now he's at Central Florida, about Anthony. And I said, does it ever kind of get old? And he's like, no, you see it just shows up all the time. You know, whether it's running a route or, you know, whatever it is, downfield. And, you know, Malzahn thinks he can play on special teams and it would show up there too. And so does Browns coordinator Mike Prefer. But he said there's just a bunch of examples of that elite speed that you just don't see. And again, we talk about Odell being special. Like, right, all receivers in the league are fast, but not all of them would have a chance to go to the Olympics. And Anthony Schwartz is that kind of fast. And I really think that was an area that the Browns missed last year, especially when Odell got hurt. And I thought it was an area of need. And obviously Andrew Berry did too, to identify that in the third round and go get a guy that, again, will expand Kevin Stefanski's offense because he can use him as a jet sweep guy, a fake jet sweep guy, a deep threat, anything to take the focus of the defense or take bodies away from the rest of the playmakers.
And the other thing is even if you run little bubble screens to him, you put the defense, you're putting pressure on defensive backs because they know they are not going to catch that guy if he gets by him.
No, that's a great point. And, you know, with the bubble screen, you know, corners cannot play bump and run on Anthony Schwartz because if they miss the bump, it's a touchdown. So there's going to be a cushion, and if you can get the ball get the ball to him fast enough and get one block, all of a sudden he can be gone. And that's one of the things the Browns liked about him and Malzahn is that he's good with the ball in his hands. He's not just a guy that you have to throw to behind the defense. You get it to him, and you give him a little bit of space, and he's also not afraid to break a tackle. So he's kind of got a toughness that you wouldn't necessarily think of when you talk about sprinters.
So we're going to switch the focus just a little bit. Dog Pound Daily came up with 3 players the Browns could trade for ahead of training camp, and we'll go third on this list, Jordan Hicks, linebacker from Arizona. What do you make of that one, trading for a linebacker?
Yeah, to me that would have made more sense before the offseason. You know, when you sign Anthony Walker Jr., when you draft Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah and Tony Fields II, and you had Jacob Phillips in the third round a year ago, I just don't see the same need there that there was a few months ago.
Yeah, I would agree also. Number 2 on this list, Anthony Miller, wide receiver from Chicago.
Yeah, you know, it just feels like they have so many guys. And I'll probably say that about the number 1 guy in this list too. Like, I look at this roster and I don't see many holes. And they're bringing back their top 6 receivers from a year ago and drafted Anthony Schwartz. So where would a guy fit unless you got rid of one of those receivers? And the Browns re-signed Higgins. They tendered Hodge. They drafted Peoples-Jones. Like, I just don't see an opening.
Yeah, and again, I would agree with you. This one is intriguing. The top one is Stephon Gilmore. That's a guy that held out from New England. I think it's $7 million in contract this year. You're going to have to extend him. What do you make of Gilmore?
Yeah, that one is less about the player and more about the contract. I think any team would want Stephon Gilmore. I think the Browns would figure out a way to use him. You play him every down and let him play bump and run and man coverage and let him be a shutdown guy. You know, if New England said, hey, we'll give you Gilmore for Greedy Williams, would the Browns do that? And then you slide Newsome inside maybe. But when you talk about contract, I think the Browns would be more comfortable paying Denzel Ward the 19 or 20 million a year that he's going to get, as opposed to him and Gilmore, or choosing Gilmore ahead of Ward when Gilmore, I think, is getting close to turning 30.
The other thing is, this front office, I believe, has a plan laid out, and I don't think they're going to be distracted from that unless they're overwhelmed.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the other kind of, variable is if there's an injury. Like if Denzel Ward got hurt and was going to miss significant time, then maybe Andrew Berry says, hey, we're in a Super Bowl window. We can afford to go make a move, or we feel the need to go make a move. And you saw a little bit of that with Ronnie Harrison last year. Obviously not nearly the same type of player, the same type of contract. But Grant Delpit got hurt, and Berry said, we need to go get another safety. And it wound up being a good deal for the Browns. They didn't have to give up much. And they get a guy who is going to play a lot this year, and they feel can be part of that 3-safety package. But the point is, he went after a need that was created by an injury, and that's kind of how I feel the only trade going forward would be.
So, Bleacher Report came up with top trade targets for the Browns. So on the Browns now, ahead of 2021's training camp. They have tight end Harrison Bryant or David Njoku, defensive tackle Malik Jackson. Do you see any of those potentially being traded?
Yeah, Njoku's the guy that jumps out of those three. I mean, they just signed Malik Jackson. I think he's going to play a bunch. Njoku, we know that he was a little unhappy a year ago and wanted to be traded. The Browns were in no hurry to trade him last year. Then they had already picked up that $6 million option, but it wasn't guaranteed, and they let it become guaranteed. So to me, that speaks like, hey, they trust David Njoku to at least a certain degree. They feel he's important. They like how he teams up with Austin Hooper. We know Kevin Stefanski loves to use tight ends. So I could see if somebody made the perfect offer for Njoku, the Browns saying okay. And then Harrison Bryant, I feel they think he's a building block and is only going to get better. So I don't think there's any chance they trade him. You could make an argument for Njoku, but I think that's unlikely to.
Yeah, and that's a guy that's a first-round pick with a lot of ability and a young player as well.
Yeah, and we saw Austin Hooper did not have the year that I think they hoped a year ago for a variety of reasons, and I think they feel like Njoku kind of gives them a real good backup plan.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as you can find his stuff on brownszone.com as well. Scott, thanks so much for the time and the insight. As always, appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
All right, Scott Petrak, again, you can read him, Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as brownszone.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we shift our attention to the Cavs. They got the third pick in the draft lottery. Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter, will join us, talk to us what the Cavs might be thinking, who might be available, and who they might be looking at. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back talking Cavs draft when we return.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
As the COVID-19 vaccines become available, you might be asking yourself, should I get it? And if I do, will I be able to go about life without putting my family at risk? You've got questions, and that's normal. The fact is, the vaccines are safe and effective. They're going to save lives. To get the latest on the COVID-19 vaccines, visit getvaccineanswers.org, because getting back to the moments we miss starts with getting informed. It's up to you.
Sports4CLE continues. We're going to shift our focus a little bit, start talking Cavs basketball. The Cavs actually a little bit of fortune in the draft lottery for the first time in a couple years. They move up a couple of spots and will draft third in the NBA draft coming up in July. Let's welcome in Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Chris, Cavs have to be pretty happy. Not quite number one, which would have been a home run. This is pretty close, though.
Yeah, they were elated, Dave. I mean, they went into lottery night not knowing what to expect, but the odds weren't in their favor. The math wasn't on their side. And I had been talking with members of the organization about trying to parse through, the third tier of prospects in this year's class, which it's a cluster of flawed players. Jalen Johnson, Keon Johnson, Scotty Barnes, Josh Giddey, Franz Wagner. Guys like that. Now they don't have to worry about that. Now they're finally in the position that they haven't been the last 3 years, where they're in the top tier of this particular draft. And for this particular draft, given how top heavy it is and given the fact that there are supposedly 4 players that stand out above the rest, the Cavs are finally in position to get one of those guys rather than lamenting the fact that they're picking from a pool of players that isn't that caliber.
So which one of these guys, the 4 guys that you're talking about, that would be Jalen Suggs, Jalen Green, Evan Mobley, and Cade Cunningham. Cade Cunningham probably going number 1. That's pretty universal. Which one of the guys not named Cade Cunningham fits what the Cavs would like the best, do you think?
Yeah, so that's the problem. Because if you could pick out a skill set that you could just plop onto this roster and have it be a seamless fit, it was Cade Cunningham's skill set. Size, playmaking, versatility, two-way potential, winning characteristics, things along those lines. When you start talking about Evan Mobley and Jalen Green and Jalen Suggs, you can make a case for all of them, and everybody will make their case for them. But they're not as seamless as a fit. And I think Kobe Altman, the general manager of the Cavs, kind of alluded to it last night when he said, hey, look, when we bring one of these guys here, if we do bring one of these guys here, it's going to change some of the things that we do with our roster in terms of construction, in terms of rotations, in terms of how we're going to set up minutes and things along those lines. Now, let me just say, that's a great problem to have. It certainly beats the alternative. And to me, there is no wrong decision that the Cavs could make with the third pick. That's how highly regarded these 4 players are. But none of them really are an ideal fit. Evan Mobley plays the same position that Jarrett Allen does. The Cavs gave up a first-round pick for Jarrett Allen. They're prepared to pay him in free agency. Jalen Green has a skill set very similar to Kevin Porter Jr. He's a walking bucket. He's somebody who likes to initiate offense for himself, very explosive, very athletic. The Cavs could certainly use a guy like that. They need more shot creation. They need more playmaking. They need more bucket getters because they were one of the worst offenses in the NBA last year. And then Jalen Suggs is a bigger point guard than Darius Garland, but bringing Suggs here means either he has to play off the ball or Darius has to play off the ball. So given all of that, I think based on where the Cavs are, to me, the best fit is probably Jalen Green because he replaces what they lost when they decided to move on from KPJ.
Any issue with playing, with him fitting into the structure that they have, being Jalen Green, or is that just kind of a tweak that's going to have to be made regardless?
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that you're going to have to figure out as it goes. So many people, Dave, have been talking about moving Colin Sexton to this 6th man role. And my response every single time that somebody brings that up is, okay, fine, but somebody's got to beat him out. Somebody's got to take that spot. And nobody over the last couple of years has been good enough to take Colin Sexton's spot in the starting lineup. He's been one of their most productive players. He's been one of their best players. So if Jalen Green comes here and he's better than Colin Sexton and he takes Colin's spot and Colin has to move to a 6-man role, okay, then so be it. That's the way that good teams do things like that. Heck, LaMelo Ball came off the bench early on in his rookie season. He went on to Rookie of the Year status. The thing that I would say, though, is this. If people were lamenting the fact that Kevin Porter Jr. was no longer here because of that kind of talent. And the Cavs and other people believed that some combination of Darius Garland, Colin Sexton, Kevin Porter Jr. was going to work long term. Give me a reason why that same setup can't work when you toss Jalen Green in the KPJ spot. Because that's the guy that he often gets compared to, because he has that same kind of skill set. And here's the other thing that I'll say, Dave. There are 48 minutes in a basketball game. Even if you have Darius Garland, Colin Sexton, and Jalen Green, all three of them can play 30-plus minutes. They don't have to be the same exact 30 minutes where they're all out there on the court together. Play Darius, Colin, and Jalen for 5 or 12 or 17. However you want to split it up, it's basketball. You're going to play those guys together, and you're going to play them apart. It happens that way.
You mentioned Jalen Green. That's a guy that played for the Ignite team in the G League. Is that an advantage, do you think, as opposed to the college route? You know, the detractors say, well, they're playing against guys that are in the NBA. I would say the same thing about a major college program, too, though.
Yeah, I would agree with you. You could go back and forth on this sort of thing. For me, it's the fact that he played against men. He played against guys that used to be professionals. And I think that's a huge separator. And he got to challenge himself as a teenager, not with an NBA body, but with a growing NBA body against that caliber competition. The truth is, like, the teams that he would have played against in college probably would have had like 2, maybe 3 of those guys on the roster. So that level of competition, to me, was stiffer, and it was more consistent on a night-in, night-out basis, where if he wasn't going to have it, or if he wasn't sharp for one reason or another, or his skills weren't up to the level that they needed to be, they were going to be exposed in a way that they probably wouldn't have been in college. You know, if he would have played in college, he probably would have been the biggest, fastest, most athletic player on the court every single night, no matter who he played against. Even if he played against blue bloods like Duke and Kentucky and Gonzaga and some of those teams. In the G League, it wasn't the same kind of situation. You know, there were some times that he was playing against Kenyon Martin Jr. There were some times that he was playing against Kevin Porter Jr. And he had to learn how to get by with other skills and other tools, whereas in college, he could have just out-athleted everybody.
Fair enough. All right, so the last question before we step aside, take a quick timeout. Would they trade this pick? Do you think they'll listen and entertain talks about somebody who falls in love maybe with Evan Mobley or Jalen Green, and they want to trade up for it? And what would it take to pry that number 3 pick away from the Cavs?
Dave, it would take an all-star caliber player that is in the age window where he has an opportunity to continue to progress rather than be at the opportunity where, like, his best basketball has already been played somewhere else. I have no idea who fits that. You know, a couple of years ago, the Minnesota Timberwolves and Chicago Bulls pulled off a trade for Jimmy Butler, and it involved the 7th pick, and there were other pieces involved there too, including Zach LaVine. But, you know, Jimmy at that time wasn't approaching the wrong side of 30. So find a guy that fits that. It's probably really difficult to do. But that's the kind of package I think that it would take for the Cavs to move this. The truth is, like, having the 3rd overall pick, I don't know exactly what they're going to do. They're going to explore all options. And I think that's what it comes down to. I think that's the bottom line. There is now a few different paths that are currently available to the Cavs that they could go this offseason that did not exist before the draft lottery last night. And one of them is exactly what you're talking about, a potential blockbuster trade for an all-star caliber player, a more win-now player. At the end of the day, I don't think they do that. I think they love this draft enough to just sit there at 3 and take whoever Detroit and Houston don't take. And we're one other thing that needs to be considered here. We're in a situation where for the Cavs, this roster is going to get pricey. Jared Allen could be expensive. Colin Sexton could be expensive. There's something coming down the road with Darius Garland. So having somebody that they could draft at number 3 that is on a team-friendly rookie scale contract that's not making $28 to $30 million a year the way that somebody would if they did go the trade route, that could be very, very valuable in terms of team building. And I don't know that the Cavs would be willing to give that flexibility up.
Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter for The Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, Kevin Love will be in the Olympics. Could that help his value? We'll also look at could the Cavs be interested in trying to acquire Ben Simmons from the 76ers? Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
First, they said cigarettes were safe. We know how that turned out. Now, they say they didn't market e-cigarettes to teens. Fact, more than 1 in 4 high school students are vaping, and 80% say their first e-cigarette was flavored. Vaping is harmful to developing brains. The reason we think vaping is safe? Marketing. Same lies, different day. Tell Big Vape to quit lying.
Welcome back to Sports for CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Cavs basketball with Chris Fedor. Chris, Kevin Love is going to play for Team USA in the Olympics. Can that help him kind of show he still can be a very effective player and potentially help his value around the league?
Say that again, Dave. One more time.
Do you think that Kevin Love playing with the Olympic team can help his value around the league and make that contract potentially movable?
Well, that's complicated. I don't know at this point in his career. I think there's enough evidence of who Kevin is at this stage that I don't know that there's anything he can really do to become a valuable asset. I think at this point in time, when you're talking about a potential trade for Kevin, Dave, he's a negative asset around the NBA. His age, his injury history, some of the public blow-ups that he's had, and his diminishing skill set. You know, he's on the wrong side of 30. It's tough, and he hasn't been that elite all-star caliber player or borderline all-star caliber player for 3-4 years now. So if the Cavs want to move on from Kevin, I still think no matter what he does for Team USA, no matter how he performs in the Olympics, I still think the Cavs are going to be in a really difficult position where they're going to have to attach something as a sweetener to Kevin, either one of their growing young players that they've assembled over the last couple of years or a future draft pick. And I don't think they're in any position to do that, quite frankly. So I don't think a trade for Kevin is very realistic at this point.
All right, let's shift that up a little bit. So do you think there's any way they potentially look at Colin Sexton? And again, I'm not a guy that sits here and says Colin Sexton, hasn't done this, hasn't done that. I think he's a valuable asset. I think he may not fit in the mix the way they're building it potentially. Could you see Colin Sexton as part of a trade that maybe tries to acquire somebody like Ben Simmons?
I certainly think it's something that the Cavs will listen to. I think it's something that they will explore this offseason. They have to. Any good general manager is going to listen. Every good general manager is going to take a look around the landscape of the NBA and try and figure out who could be had. Does New Orleans want to move on from Brandon Ingram, right? What does Philly want for Ben Simmons? Is Boston, with Brad Stevens now running the show, willing to break up the young pieces that they've assembled over the last couple of years? Does Jaylen Brown become available? Does Marcus Smart become available? What would it take to get either one of those guys? What's the cost for somebody like Bradley Beal from the Washington Wizards? The Cavs have to look at all of those things, especially given the fact that they do have this extremely valuable trade chip at this point in time. When it comes to Ben Simmons, it's just really, really complicated for me, Dave, because for all the really good things that he does and the things that you like about him, he is an elite defender, one of the best in the NBA. He creates opportunities for his teammates. He gives you an identity right away as a team that wants to race up and down the court. He can slash to the basket. He can play a variety of different positions. He can guard 1 through 5. For all of those things that you can say that are good, his flaws are really hard to overlook. He can't shoot. He can't shoot free throws. And because of that, he's not as aggressive as he needs to be. And it makes it really, really difficult on an offense. It restricts the ceiling that an offense can have with that kind of shooting liability. So any team that is going to acquire Ben Simmons, Dave, they're going to have to change their entire roster. They're going to have to put shooters around him. They're going to have to find a space the floor 5. And I keep coming back to this. Is Ben Simmons really good enough, a high enough level player that you're going to change your entire roster to fit? I'm not sure I'd go that direction, especially if I'm the Cavs, especially if I don't have enough shooting. And we all know, we watched it last year. The Cavs don't have enough shooting as it is. Bringing in another non-shooter is a really dangerous game to play.
Yeah, fair enough point. Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. As always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Chris.
You got it, man. Anytime.
All right, Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter. Make sure you read him in the pages of the Plain Dealer and on cleveland.com. That'll do it for this edition of Sports4CLE. We will see you tomorrow. Scheduled guest Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, as well as Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. Have a great night, everybody. We will see you again tomorrow right here, Sports4CLE.